everybody. This is going to be a my third lecture. What my third lecture is going to be about is strings are bad. It's going to be about how strings shouldn't be used in certain aspects, and I'll get a little bit into that a little bit more here. Um, you know, strings aren't really bad, but they're often used badly, I guess, especially by beginners who use them as substitutes for other types, and that's what this page is about in this lecture, because for that, they are bad. The reason it happens, I suspect, is because strings are usually the first Java class we learn about, and therefore the most familiar. They can also contain pretty much anything you care to put in them, which often makes them seem like an ideal placeholder, but they're not. Here's a classic declaration from a beginner's program. So, as you can see, string color equals green. Now it may look perfectly reasonable to you, but to an experienced programmer it's just plain wrong, and on many levels. Why? Firstly, because a string is not a color; it's a set of characters. In the case here, it's G-R-E-E-E and N, and that's all it is. A string like 127 may look like a number, but it isn't one. Just try adding two of them together and see what happens. At best you'll get an error, and at worst you'll end up with something that looks like this. So you can't add those two strings together like they would be integers. Secondly, Java, already has a perfectly reasonable class called color, which encapsulates some of the aspects of a genuine color. Indeed, the color class, even when a constant called green, or even has a constant called green, and if it doesn't cover what you want, you make your own class. That's what object orientation is all about. I know some people in my class won't know too much about the whole object orientation portion of Java at this point, but just know that I will get into that a little bit later, and it'll make a little bit more sense. So now obviously I don't mean that you should never use strings for a name or a film title or a piece of text. It's plainly the right type to use, but don't write something like this. So creating a string called start date and putting a date. And if you do that, you may have some of your seniors, telling you that you're doing things that should never be done in programming. Just remember the mantra: objects good, strings bad. Input. Often a program will need to receive input in string form, either from a file or from the console, a JText field, something like that, maybe a web page. But in such cases, you should convert them to an appropriate Java type as soon as you possibly can. If they're numbers, convert them to a number. If they're true or false or yes or no, convert them into a Boolean. And most important of all, if it's a string containing information about a customer, convert it to a customer object. And if you don't have a customer class, make one. That's what object-oriented programming is all about. Yes, it makes a bit more writing and, more importantly, a bit more thought, but your program will be a lot better for it. Here's an example. A common trap that newbies fall into is to use strings so they can hold values they want to display. This is a very poor reason to use them, especially as all objects have a toString method, which is designed specifically for this purpose. A recent example came from somebody that posted who wanted to know how to fill a 2D array of aircraft seats with, I'll show you here, with a dash so that he could display them, kind of like this. So this is a, seats where the dashes were denoted as an empty seat and the X's were a reserved one. His seat array was duly defined as this here. So as you can see, we have string here. He wanted to write a pile of code to initialize each seat to dash and then change it to an X when it was reserved, which is reasonable. That way it's not, it's laid out. It's not so terrible, you may think, but it's fundamentally flawed because it makes each seat a procedure rather than what it should be, an object. And as again, Java is an object-oriented language. It also indicates a basic misunderstanding of the difference between what an object is and what it's supposed to look like. The answer, well, I would advise him to create a seat class, and I suspect that most experienced programmers will do the same. Now the definition becomes a little bit more something like this. Now you see I have a seat, and when I go to, I don't know, reserve a seat, I could have something kind of like that, and it looks a lot more clearer than this. So what this would do, instead of saying that I'm just going to mark it as an X or whatever, I'm actually just putting a dot reserve, which is pretty darn simple. It makes sense when programming. Furthermore, now that you have a proper class, you can add things to it. For example, a field that says whether it's a window seat or an aisle seat or neither, or whether it's economy or business class. Try doing that with a string. If you want to display this out in the way he wanted to, with dashes and X's being reserved, dashes being open, you could easily make a method called toString, and it would return, if this is reserved, make it an X, if not, make it a dash. Simple as that. So as you can see, don't use strings just to do something. I think when I first started programming, the biggest thing I did was do string like, I don't know, Like I always did string is it time to run, and I would do like true, literally just that. I could have easily you can turn that into a boolean, just by going, boolean is it time to run, getting rid of the double quotes. It's the same thing. I think a lot of people have problems with doing a lot of things and just making them string right away when you should make them something else. And like I said earlier in this lecture, if you have to take it in from a string, like a JText field or user input or whatever, immediately convert it to the type of data you're going to actually utilize it with. So that means like, I don't know, like JText field dot get the text. I set that to a string real quick, so string input, right, equals that. And then let's say input is age in integer format, okay? So then, immediately convert this. This is going to be an age. So immediately convert that string called input into a into an int. So you could do int age equals integer dot parse int input, like that, and it would parse it, and obviously it will return a integer and store it to that variable. You might get some errors here or there if they actually typed in the letter 5 instead of the number 5, but that's what programming is. So you immediately take it what you wanted in string format, because the JText field always returns a string no matter what they type in. Just immediately convert it over to the correct object. So All right. I hope that helps a little bit when it comes to programming. Other than that, have a good one.